You're going to be in a place to be, and welcome to the podcast. So, before we get going, I know you are the founder of the Insecurity Project. So, before we start talking about this, and I know you can speak better on it than I can, why don't you give a brief introduction of yourself and basically the gist of what the Insecurity Project is, and we'll take this party from there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Look, so when I announced to my business coach maybe 4 years ago that I was going to call myself the Insecurity Project, after I'd been coaching for 8 years prior, and often all the work I'd been doing had been helping people uncover limiting beliefs and make change there. But I really went hard after this one word, insecurity, and he told me, no, Jaemin, you can't do that. That's the wrong name. People are insecure about being insecure. No one's going to be reaching out to you because people are afraid. But I was ruined for anything else, because I watch people suffer greatly because they don't know that insecurity is a solvable problem. They get stuck in these narratives about themselves and stuck in defending themselves and proving themselves so they don't get found out. And it weakens them to the point of madness. And so I felt like my own experience of insecurity, it was solvable. And then all the clients I'd ever coached, I felt it too was solvable for them. And so it felt really unkind to hold back a framework and to end some unnecessary suffering in the world. So the Insecurity Project aims to provide some really clear, complete, and intelligent thinking about a universal problem that most people think is not solvable. Most people imagine the best you can do with insecurity is just mask it or manage it or even medicate it, just to get away from the pain of that gnawing, nagging fear that there's something wrong. So I have a podcast, I've written some books, I get to speak in this subject. I work with ambitious people who are trying to live their best life, but have never known what to do with their past, with their fear, with these stories that limit them. And so that's the Insecurity Project.
This kind of the reason why I wanted to talk to you about it, just because, like you said, a lot of people probably do suffer from some type of, maybe suffer is not the right word, but have some type of insecurities, and they're afraid to reach out to people just because they don't want to look bad or look like a fool, or possibly even make it worse. And, for somebody saying, oh, you should be insecure about X, Y, and Z. But, I find myself with part of it, just as far as, I think you touch on imposter syndrome a little bit, and in certain situations that starts to come around with me based on, if I'm getting ready to do something, as far as my workouts when I'm competing or anything new or anything like that. But kind of like what you said, I feel like I've got a good handle on it now and know how to, when I start to feel a certain way, I put up a red stop sign in my head and like, all right, let's change my way of thinking here and change that. And that's what helps me, is that, but it still, sticks in the back of my head every now and again, wants to come back around. So do you think it's almost completely curable, or is it just always going to kind of sit around, but you just got to get a beat on it, so to speak?
Well, I actually think it's completely solvable for your current level of growth. Not many people agree with me on that, but that's okay. So I think that not only is it solvable, I think it's our most important adult work is to free ourselves from the narratives that would hold us back, from the assumptions that say we can't have what we want, or we don't belong, or we're not good at. And I'm convinced that there are, my life's work is represented in the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity. And I think they are effective. And the aim is to be fully free from insecurity at your current level of growth. So you are unhindered. You can show up at your best where it matters most. However, when you do that, the interesting experience is that you'll be free to explore new areas. You'll grow, you'll go beyond your current levels of comfort and experience. And so you'll experience new uncertainty, and you will bang your head on new levels of insecurity as well. So that won't represent regression. That'll just represent new narratives that have been uncovered. You worked out you were good enough for that level, but are you good enough for this level? You worked out you were good enough to earn that amount of money, but can you earn this amount of money? You could work with this kind of person, but can you work with that kind of person? So again, the same 7 practices that solved insecurity at the last level of growth can solve it at the next level of growth, and on you go.
So speaking of a level of growth, do you find that the older person gets, they find with themselves with less insecurities? I'm sorry, my dog's barking right now for whatever reason, but he's But for level of growth, is the older you get, you find yourself maybe with less insecurities based on maybe when you were younger, and that you kind of learn.
It doesn't automatically resolve itself. So I would say, the older you get, if you don't find a way of resolving insecurities, then the more maddening your experience becomes. I think insecurity weakens the human being. It really undermines you. I feel like all your best energy gets sent towards proving yourself and defending yourself. So you don't have energy left for growth and for kindness and for relationships. So I think, it doesn't naturally solve itself just because you get older. It gets worse as you get older if you don't solve it. We all know people who are later in life who've never found a way out of their insecurities. You're not having a rational conversation with these people. You are speaking to their fear, and it's got inside every cell in their body. It's in their bones. You can feel it. It's dehumanized them.
I was just wondering was kind of wondering if the older person gets, if they go through different experiences in life and they learn how to handle certain situations, and they learn that, for whatever reason they're having insecurity, whether it be their income or I don't know, the way they look, or is that, anything, they just kind of learn that, how to handle it. But I guess that makes more sense that you just stick with it if you don't really seek out help, like with yourself, and learn, like, with me, like I listen to a few books, or I'm an audiobook guy. I listen to some books and podcasts and talk with some different people like yourself and learn to get more of a beat on it. And so I guess if you don't do that, then if you don't, like you said, if you don't solve the problem earlier, it's probably just going to keep sticking with you and probably almost initially start getting worse and worse.
It does. And I think that's not just bad for the individual, it's bad for the world, because if you show up weakened by this fear, then it changes the way you relate to your partner and your kids and your friends and your family. And so I think it kind of weakens the collective consciousness of the planet when we don't free ourselves from these narratives. So I think it's really important work. It's still rare. Most people won't find a way out of their limiting beliefs. They'll just compensate for them or bunker down around them. And so that's kind of the message that I feel is important to share is, no, this is a solvable problem, and a really important one to solve for the sake of the planet. Not just you, it'll obviously help you, but it helps everything around you and how you show up. And so the world gets healed as individuals heal their own fear and heal their own past in many ways.
I guess we already kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you think a lot of it is with maybe just modern times with, social media, information overload, always trying to be, the top of, a leader in their industry or whatever it is, and that's just almost too much for any one person to handle. And then when they might find a failure of some sort or even being rejected by a mate or partner or whatever, and that's what starts to develop these. We find more and more problems in modern times, I guess, is my question.
Sure. I think the modern times just exacerbate the issue and speed up the issue. I don't think it really changes the fact that insecurity is this fear that I'm no good. And typically a person looks outside themselves to solve that problem. So a child wonders if they're good enough, so then looks for their parents or their friends or their peers to kind of pump them up, make them feel good. Yep. So most people go their whole life still externalizing their need for validation, approval, significance, love. And social media just helps people do that. It says, we can connect you with the world. You want people to validate you, to tell you you're awesome. Well, keep doing this, keep working hard at getting people's approval by how you look, how you can perform, what you can achieve. The problem is, though, it's all external. And the moment it falls down, you're left in deficit. Or the moment you get one negative bit of external feedback, it ruins you. So, the aim of the game, I think a great metaphor for overcoming insecurity is actually fully becoming an adult. It's to realize that, as an adult, the aim is to become self-sufficient. And that's not just financially and physical. It's actually emotional. It's intellectual. It's psychological. It's the ability to learn how to fill your own cup, to validate your own existence, to reference your own opinion, to bring things in-house rather than externalizing them. So that's a big part of solving insecurity, is becoming an adult and finding how to meet your own needs rather than needing the world to do that for you.
So you become an adult and you say, well, I reach out to somebody like yourself to start helping me with this problem. How would it start? I mean, how would do you start with initial consultation and just kind of ask questions, I would assume, and just kind of see where the insecurities are coming from, or what exactly insecurities are, or just basically how does the whole work if I decide to reach out for somebody and get some help?
Yeah, sure. So the interesting thing is people imagine their experience of insecurity is really complicated and unique, that no one quite suffers like they do. And so they think they're going to need a unique solution. But I've had 15,000 coaching hours over the last 12 years in this subject. And so it's such a boring problem in my mind. It's so predictable. It's so structured. It's so universal, which is great. Like, because that's what you want. You want someone who could solve a problem in their sleep. It's so simple in their mind. So someone comes feeling like, oh no, my problem's different. My struggle's harder. And my job's to take them out of their story, to help them stop thinking that they're so special, and to bring them into process, out of story, out of fear, and into process. And so then the invitation to actually examine the 7 practices for overcoming insecurity, and to see that there is a roadmap, there is a path. It's a predictable path because it's a predictable problem. So then it's an invitation to understand these 7 practices and how they apply to their individual life.
So, all right. So these 7 practices, can we go over those?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So just to be clear, my life's work was not to invent these 7. It was to, first of all, discover them when I, encountered my own insecurity, probably when I was 31 or 32, when I stepped out of my comfort zone, tried to launch my own business and write my own book, and was like, oh no, now I've put myself out in the world, and I'd gone from this safe space to going, I'm out there, and all this insecurity was instantly exposed and it paralyzed me. And so I began a quest to go, is this a solvable problem? And in my quest to do that, I discovered there were plenty of people that had solved it. And in every case, these 7 practices showed up, whether they were aware of it or not. And so my life's work, firstly, was to apply these 7 to myself, and then to model it and to create structure around it so that it became a pathway for others to follow too.
Well, let me interject a little. That's actually not a bad way to actually do it, is like put the work on yourself, right? And just say,
oh, you have to.
Yeah. Is it working? Is it not working? Or can we tweak this a little bit here and there? And that's how I learn. I learn from my mistakes for the big
Exactly. You got to embody your message and smoke what you're selling and apply it to yourself first.
But that was a bold move, though, to go out and just start it, right? I mean, I couldn't. Was it stressful for you? I mean, obviously,
it wasn't initially, because it felt so life-giving and so energizing. But then it was stressful because then I found a bunch of fear and uncertainty in myself, and realized there were some things I'd never uncovered in myself, some stories from my childhood, some beliefs and assumptions about myself that I wasn't good enough, that I'd kind of been able to hide behind. But then I'd exposed myself by jumping into the world. These.
Was that the first time you'd done something big like that?
Well, yeah, kind of, because I'd become a church pastor. So I grew up in a Christian world.
Okay.
It made sense to me. It was very safe, very loving. I became the pastor of the church that I grew up in, so it was a stretch, obviously, but it was a stretch within a safe world, a world that I felt that I was good at, that I belonged to. So it wasn't until I kind of left that world and started a coaching business, and, with people who are outside my familiar tribe, that I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know this world, and this world doesn't know me. And now I feel exposed. Now I feel like a fraud. I feel like I don't belong. And so, that was a massive step for me. And I didn't see it coming, because I'd always kind of felt like I was a confident guy. So it was that stepping out that exposed it to me.
But do you feel like it changed you? I mean, it seems like it did, obviously, because you knew you could take a step out like that.
Yeah.
You learned that.
Of course.
I can handle this.
Of course it did. Yeah, of course it did. Because when I uncovered my insecurity and worked through them, I realized, I was okay. And it was all just in my head, and these fears were built on a work of fiction. And so, freeing myself from that meant that I was able to step up and step into this space and really align with a purpose that was bigger than me and not about me. And, I think I was a good pastor, but I think I'm an excellent coach. I think this is really what I was born to do. And, since then I've just finished written my 5th book, and, get to speak it around the world and connect with all kinds of really amazing people doing all kinds of things, and equip them with a framework that they didn't have, and they wouldn't have had I not overcome my own insecurity. So it's definitely changed me. Absolutely.
We'll get to those principles here in a minute, but touching on that a little bit, I mean, starting this podcast was one of the biggest things of me kind of stepping out my comfort zone and knowing that I'm going to open myself up to the world and, everything that's positive or negative in it. And how would I be able to handle like that? And just, I always feel like a lot of people, when I'm generally speaking, find themselves in some comfort zone and they never really take a chance at something they really want out of life or whatever. And like, do you have a safe space and, you're secure and, nothing can go wrong. But if you take yourselves out of these barriers and you find out what you're made of and find out how you can handle these. And once you overcome them, it's a whole new feeling. And so, yeah, I was just wanting to say that I just admire like stories like that, just that, you take a chance at something, because I feel like so many people end up not taking that chance. And that would even cause, just something inside them as far as insecurity and kind of regret and remorse that they never, and almost resentment that they never took a chance on something they really wanted to do. They just always played it safe, which is, I'm not saying it's always bad, but it's not always.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nathaniel Branden, his book, The Psychology of Self-Esteem, he talks about the fact that you can kind of break down life into one simple choice. Do you either face up or do you run away?
Ooh.
So when life presents an opportunity or an adventure or a chance to step up, you either accept it or you run. And so the interesting thing when you run or when you hide is that in the process, you take shame, guilt, and anxiety with you, because you teach yourself that you're not good enough, that you don't have what it takes, that you're not a strong person, and that you have to keep running. So you're right. When you hide, when you pull back, when you run, you undermine your own self-esteem and build this pattern of weakness that just gets worse. As opposed to when you face up, it's hard and daunting. You don't think you're going to do it, but you actually get through it. And in the process, you teach yourself you're stronger than you thought, and you do have what it takes, and you're going to be okay. And it becomes a success reference point, and it levels you up. And then you think, well, if I did that, that was possible. What else is possible? What else could I do that I didn't think I could do before?
Yeah, many people don't want to open themselves up just because you think most people are scared of being vulnerable.
Well, I think most people are insecure. I think that's the problem. They fear that if they were to step up, they're going to get found out. And if they get found out, it's going to be catastrophic, because then everyone will see who they really are. And at their core, they're afraid that they're no good, they don't fit in. Yeah, it's an insecurity problem.
But it's got to lead to some type of vulnerability too, I would think too, and just learn how to, I don't know, I guess that's a fine line you go along with being insecure and vulnerable, or are they almost one and the same?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes people get rewarded for vulnerability in a way that makes them more dysfunctional. So, if you come out and say, look, I got mental health issues, I'm struggling with anxiety, I've been suffering with depression, you're almost celebrated for that vulnerability, which seems strange to me, because it's like, hang on a minute. The point of vulnerability is not to be rewarded for being vulnerable. The point of vulnerability is to step into the light, be clear about what's going on, and then change it, and then get help, and then deal with it. Like, don't stop in vulnerability. Great.
That's a good point. That's a great point. I didn't think about it in that light, but yeah, you shouldn't be. I don't know, what is the fine line to be not to reward that, and how do you or tell somebody it's okay to be vulnerable or insecure sometimes without rewarding it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it speaks to the first practice. I don't know if you're ready for me to explore these 7 practices.
Yeah. We can go ahead.
So practice 1 is to step into the light. So that's a vulnerable thing to do. So step into the light. So that means stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending, stop avoiding. To be honest, and say, yeah, I get you're insecure about being insecure, but until you actually admit you're insecure, well, you can never change that. Until you admit there's a problem, until you admit you're not happy, that you're stuck, that you're afraid, like, you can't do anything about it.
Sure. I agree with that.
Yoda says, named must your fear be, before banish it you can. So you got to get clear. You got to turn the light on. You got to come out. So that's a massively vulnerable thing to do, but that's just practice 1. So that's not the end of the game. That's just the beginning.
That's the same way with almost addiction, right? To admit that there's a problem.
Well, 100%. There's no other way. And so the interesting thing, though, with insecurity is that when you step into the light, so much of insecurity festers in the dark. It becomes a monster because you never name it. You never get precise. So it's these big abstract fears, these big broad assumptions that are just terrorizing you and undermining you. But when you turn the light on and actually have a look, it's never as bad as you thought it was. So, for example,
Like
People often,
we make them worse than what they really are.
we do. They take on a life of themselves.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
So step into the light. So specifically with insecurity, people think, I say to people, what are you most afraid of? And often it's either one of two things. It's some kind of fear of failure or some kind of fear of rejection, or sometimes it's both. I'm going to try something that's not going to work, or I'm going to put myself out there and people aren't going to like me. Sure, I get it. But that's not accurate. That's not what anyone is actually afraid of. It's the level beneath that. Because if you think you're afraid of failure, the only way to never fail is never try.
Good point.
That doesn't even make sense. And the only way to never be rejected is to never put yourself out there or obsess about pleasing every single person for the rest of your life. So they're kind of nonsense solutions because they're not really the problem.
I would agree.
The problem is one level beneath. So if you think about this, you're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of the personal implications of failure. You're afraid that if you were to fail, now it says something about you as a human being. You are a failure. It's same as rejection. You're not afraid of being rejected. You're afraid that if you were to be rejected, what does that say about you? It says that in your mind, it says that you don't belong, you don't deserve, you're not worthy of love.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So you're actually afraid of your own opinion of yourself. And
that's very good point. I never thought about it like that, but that's exactly when I've taken chances and done stuff that if I didn't take the chance to, ask the girl out or, take a step into trying something new or whatever, I was really just afraid of what was going on inside me rather than what would actually happen afterwards.
So that's good. So when you step into the light and you see, I'm afraid of my own opinion of me. I'm not afraid of their opinion of me. I'm afraid of what I think of me. And it's just an opinion. I'm afraid of my own opinion of myself. So you think, okay, well, it's just an opinion. What if that opinion's wrong? Like it's already, the fear's getting smaller and smaller the more closely you're looking at it. And then even more amazing is you realize that this opinion more than likely started before you were 7 or 10. So what you're actually dealing with is the opinion of a scared child. That's what this whole insecurity is based on. Some stuff went down when you were young. You assumed it meant something bad about you, formed an opinion about it, gathered some evidence. You became certain you were right. And that became the story. And you've just assumed it was true ever since. So
that's perfect. That's exactly it.
So when you get some eyes on it, turn the lights on and go, all I'm dealing with here is the opinion of a scared child. Then you go, that has to be a solvable problem. Like you go from this abstract monster that you could never touch to now realizing all you're dealing with is the opinion or assumption of a scared child. We can fix that problem. I promise you.
I would agree. I would agree with that. And that would take us on to step 2.
Practice 2 is then to go, righto, because people go, yeah, okay, I've got an opinion problem, and it's as a child I formed opinions about myself. But then they're like, so why did I form those opinions? Oh, that's right. I formed those opinions because of what was said to me or done to me, because my dad was mean, or I got bullied, or I was abused, or my parents were divorced. So then it's like, it's not my fault that I've got these opinions. Other people made me have these opinions. And so I'm stuck. I'm now a victim. So I can't change it. It is what it is. You can't change the past. Oh, well, I just have to manage it.
I've seen that, and even with myself, that I've had friends and, family members and just say, oh, well, this is how it was always been done with my family. And this is just how it was ingrained on me and I can't change it. And so that's not true. You can change it. You're completely different from your parents or whoever in a certain way. So if you really want to change something and grow out of, an insecurity, you can. You just because your parents did it or whatever doesn't mean that it's ingrained on you.
Well, this is the point of practice too, because it realizes where the action took place. So I don't know if you've ever thought about misdirection before, but it's a magician's only trick.
Yeah.
So if they can convince you all the action's happening in their left hand and you're paying full attention to the left hand, they could be doing anything in the right hand, but you're not watching.
Correct.
And so the trick happens. It feels supernatural. It's magic. You can't control it. So that's often what happens when a person reviews their past. There's all this misdirection happening. They think all the action took place over here. What was said to them, what was done to them, what was modeled, the bad things that happened. That's not where the action happened. It always happened over here. we are sense-making creatures. We're storytellers. We go into the world with two questions for every experience. Question one, why did that happen? Question two, what does it mean about me? That's where all the action's happening. So parents get divorced. It's not the divorce that ruins your life. It's the answer to the question. So why is this happening? I think it's happening because I annoyed my parents. I stressed them. What does it mean about me? It means that I hurt the people I love. If I was a better kid, my parents would still be together. I ruined this. I did this. So the opinion of a 4-year-old answering those questions, that's what creates the narratives, not what happens. So when you see that, you kind of realize you're not the actor in this story being written for you. You're the storyteller. You've got the pen. You've always had the pen. You're the one creating these narratives. You're the one forming these opinions. And when you see that you created them, then you kind of go, well, then I can change them.
Sure.
If you think someone else created them, then you're going to hope that someone else changes it for you, or you're going to hope that your parents apologize, or the bully apologizes, or whoever hurt you comes back and fixes it. But that's not what created the problem. Correct. You did this. You decided. You agreed. You assumed. You formed an opinion. So until you go back and review those opinions and those assumptions, you'll still be stuck. But practice 2 is to take responsibility for your role in the storytelling and to go back and review that.
Basically just kind of self-reflect on yourself and just really learn, create self-awareness and how it really happened.
Yeah, but to review the data is an important distinction because, to go back and have a look at that experience, because you made assumptions based on very limited data as a kid with not much emotional intelligence, not much maturity. You assumed parents being divorced must have been about you. But you go back and review the data and you're like, well, actually, you were 4 and you thought you had the power to ruin your parents' life. You couldn't even tie your shoes at 4. Like,
good point.
let alone had the power to ruin a marriage. Like, settle down a bit. That wasn't about you. That had nothing to do with you. I didn't think about that. So it's to question the assumptions based on reviewing the data. So it is a journey back to the origins, back to the beginning of these stories. That is an essential part of overcoming insecurity. You got to go all the way back.
All the way back. And even if your parents are probably trying to blame the son or daughter that it was their fault, that it's probably really not. It was just that father or mother just focusing their external anger onto their child just because.
Totally right. Yeah. It's still misdirection. It's still misdirection. No one has the power to bless you or curse you without your permission. Don Miguel Ruiz in the 4 Agreements, he says, it's not the words. Incredible book. It's not the words spoken to you that ruin your life. It's just the ones you agree with. So you have the pen. You're the one forming the opinions.
Yeah.
That's practice 2, 100% responsibility.
I would agree. I like that. Okay. So we're going over to number 3.
So number 3 is to stack the pain. So no one's ever solved this problem except from a place of pain. It's easy to ignore pain. Like, this is how people smoke cigarettes. Like, you'd think in today's world, we know smoking causes cancer. It's very expensive. All kinds of side effects, but you can just ignore that if you want. You don't have to pay attention to the cost. But if you did pay attention to the cost and stack the pain and go, oh my goodness, this is costing me, this is killing me, this is, creating a whole bunch of side effects, then you link a massive amount of pain to that. And then naturally everything we link pain to, we want to avoid. So to stack the cost for insecurity is to stop pretending it's not ruining your life, to stop pretending it's normal or natural or unavoidable, and to realize, no, your fear about not being good enough is ruining your marriage. It's ruining your parenting. It's stopping you ever going for that promotion. It's getting in the way of your finances. Like, it's creating chaos in your life. Stop pretending that it's not. Get some eyes on the cost. Do an accurate cost assessment for how these opinions you formed in your childhood that are still running your life, see how they are costing you. Because if you could be clear about how they're costing you, you have such an incredible amount of motivation to go, well, it has to stop here. Sure, it's scary to face the fear, but if I don't, this gets worse. Another 10 years of living like this, oh my goodness. Like, the cost just compounds into the future. Everything we do in life is motivated by avoiding pain and pursuing pleasure. And you can change your pain associations by what you pay attention to. So stack the pain is about assessing cost accurately for unresolved insecurity in your life, so you have massive motivation to do something about it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that just over time how much damage they can be doing themselves, mentally and physically just by taking these negative behavioral patterns. And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's so I don't know, mind blowing or what the word I'm looking for is here, but I just don't understand if it's just people just getting this that negative behavioral loop, or and they just think it's actually a positive behavioral loop, and that's just how they reward themselves. Like you said, smoking cigarettes, and there's so much information out there. Just says it's obviously not good for you, but it's like I guess with that insecurity, that's just the only thing they have to actually look forward for themselves, to reward
Exactly.
themselves, and it makes no sense how people can get into that loop of behavior. I just don't understand it at all.
Well, that's right. It's just the amazing thing about being a human. We don't have to pay attention to everything. We can't pay attention to everything. And what we pay attention to changes how we experience life. So you can avoid the things that are killing you. You can. But if you actually paid attention and were honest, then you have massive motivation to do something about that. So that's practice 3.
So you turn that pain into the motivation.
It drives you. No one solves this except from a place of pain. No one comes to me and go, oh, yeah, Jaemin, it would kind of be nice to have some better beliefs about myself. They come to me and they go, Jaemin, like I'm dying. This is killing me. If I keep going like this, I'll end up divorced. My kids will hate me. I'll ruin my business. I'll end up broke. This is chaos here, and I can't live another day being eaten alive by these fears and insecurities. Like I don't want to be this guy.
Do you find out a lot of your clients are almost have hit rock bottom with insecurities, so to speak?
Well, perhaps not, but they have to have pain. So I think rock bottom, I don't think is necessary. I think if you can realize that you don't necessarily have to get to the absolute point of surviving for your life before you can change it. If you can see that there's a map, then you can be a bit more mature about it and stack the pain before it gets catastrophic and nip it in the bud here. It's like a business. Like you don't have to get bankrupt to learn a business lesson. You could actually have a look at the books, realize, oh my goodness, this is going backwards, and make some change here. You don't have to let it go all the way before you make change. You could stop it early. So that's the same with insecurity. You could stop it now if you want. Just get some eyes on the cost. That'll create enough motivation to go, yep, good. I've got to do this. I know I'm afraid of going back and reviewing the past and having a look, but if I don't, there's more pain involved in staying the same than change. Often people link more pain to change than staying the same. And so they just keep staying in their comfort zone.
And a lot of people don't like change, though, do you think?
Of course they don't. So this is going, yeah, sure, you don't like change, but if now there's more pain involved in staying here, then it doesn't matter that there's pain involved in change because it's less pain than not changing.
I would agree with that 100%. Let's go to number 4.
So that's only half the motivation strategy. If it's just about pain avoidance, then you'll do just enough to get out of pain and then you'll stop.
Okay.
So practice 4 is you got to think about pleasure. You got to think about developing a compelling life vision because you're going to need some, not just moving away from motivation, but moving towards motivation. So don't just tell me what you don't want. What do you want? What's the dream? Like, where are you taking this thing? What would excite you? What would you love to have happen?
Yeah.
That's an essential part of being a human. To desire is human. And so many people have shut down desire because it's too costly and dangerous. But you got to get back into that dream space again and start lifting your eyes and setting some vision for your future and realizing that if you don't achieve that, if you get to the end of your life and you've not ever done what you were capable of, you're going to be devastated. So that compelling vision is a really important piece. And you think about the hero's journey, like Frodo, if he loses sight of the fact that his vision is to rid the world of this ring, then it all gets way too hard. Like, what's the point of risking his life every day being attacked by orcs? Go back to the Shire, Frodo. Like, there's no point. But he's like, no, I must. This is my destiny. I have to. This is for others. I have to. This is my destiny. And so that sense of vision, destiny, purpose is a central part of this, because if you don't solve insecurity, you're never going to be the man or woman that you desire to be. You're never going to actually achieve your potential, and that's catastrophic.
Do you think that's, I don't want to say a social narrative, but maybe just a narrative that's kind of taught for adolescents growing up that, hey, only 1% out of actually make their dreams and become something, an actor, a basketball player, whatever, soccer player, whatever you want to say. So it's kind of taught that, just go for the safe road, kind of what we were just touching on earlier. Just go to safe road, find a job, go to college, find the job, work out your years, and then just figure it out after that. Do you think a lot of it just that's how it's ingrained now on people?
Well, more than just ingrained, I think it's intuitive. Like if you go to a primary school or, someone who's under 10 and you ask them what they want, often they've still got the dream of want to play NBA, want to be a superstar, or want to be an astronaut. Like they've got the dream because anything's possible.
Sure.
But by the time someone's 15, 16, 17, 18, they've realized that's not how the world works. You don't get what you want. You get what you get. You settle, you survive. It's too dangerous to put yourself out there because it'll hurt if you don't do that. So I think most people just realize to dream is dangerous, especially if you're insecure, because if you set a bar and tell everyone this is what you're going to do and don't achieve it, then that proves that you're no good. It proves that you weren't smart or strong. And so it's just safer not to dream. But in the process of shutting that down, you dehumanize yourself because humans are dreamers. Humans do desire. It's a central part of being alive. We want what we want. Yeah. Every living thing grows. We have this desire to expand, to experience more. And so that's to be honest and go, yeah, actually, I do want more. I do want happiness and success and love and influence. That is central to what I want. So let's be honest about that rather than pretending that's not true.
If we didn't have people who didn't dream and try to, think of new ideas and take chances, kind of like what yourself did, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. It still blows my mind that we're able to do, these conversations virtually. You're in Australia, correct? And I'm on, we're on the other side of the world. And that throughout this, our paths would have never crossed, or most likely would have probably never crossed, or actually had to sit down. Yeah, had to sit down and have a conversation such as this. And so it's just like, don't be afraid to dream, man. Don't be afraid to take those chances.
Exactly. And even think that, this microphone, I look at the technology. How do we make this thing? Like who came up with this idea? How did that happen? Yeah, because someone dreamed.
Exactly. Who took the time to sit around and make all these different, ways? Like who was it? Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb?
Yeah,
he said,
Thomas Edison. That's right.
Yeah. He said hey, when he first did it, he said, well, I found out like 99 ways not to make one or something until he finally did it right. So
exactly. Yeah, for sure. So that's four, is to get in touch with your dream again. And yes, it's dangerous, and yes, it's difficult, and yes, it's costly, but it's human. And if you lose sight of the dream, there's no point facing your fear. It's too hard. Everyone who's ever solved insecurity has got back into this sense that they do desire more for their life, and they would be very unsatisfied if they got to the end with the music still inside them.
Do you think that's also part of this human nature? We're always just desiring more, and what's the next best thing is?
Well, it is. It's an honest thing about being human. To desire is human. So it's there. People who tell me, I don't know what I want, or I don't want anything. I'm like, rubbish. I don't believe you, not even for a second. You're just afraid. You're just scared.
Yeah,
you just got hurt before. You just protected yourself and are playing it safe. You do have desire. You do have the capacity for more than you're currently experiencing. You're just afraid. So if you're going to solve insecurity, you have to be clear about the quest that you're on and get in touch with that adventure and that desire again, because it is inside you.
Here's a good question that with your clients and, talking about desires and what do you want out of life? And do you find that there's a difference in working with somebody who's very introverted versus extroverted, and they just can't really open up and tell you exactly just because they're not comfortable? They just, it's like kind of what you said. They've always been shamed if they actually did try to take a chance and opened up. And, but somebody obviously who's extroverted probably doesn't mind talking and tell you anything and everything that they want to. Is there a challenge there?
Of course there's a challenge there, but I undermine that challenge by questioning the assumption that they actually are an introvert. I think all that's happened there is they've developed a persona to meet their needs and protect their fears at a previous time in life. They're not actually an introvert, just like someone's not actually an extrovert. It's just a strategy that's worked for them. It's a strategy that's met their needs and protected their fears. So again, it's an insecurity problem. I would say I would just question that assumption. Obviously, at times before, you've been honest, you've put a hope out there, or a dream out there, you've been shut down, you've been rejected, it's hurt. And so you've made a vow, that's it. I'll never put myself out there again. I'll never have an opinion. I'll be quiet. I'll wait for others. Then I can't get hurt. And then you've convinced yourself that that's who you are. That's not who you are. Like that's nowhere near who you are. It's just a character you've developed to serve a purpose in a season. And
It's almost maybe a defense mechanism just for
it's
somebody.
entirely a defense
Yeah,
mechanism.
yeah.
Absolutely it is.
Like people who say they don't really care what people think about them, and that's just what they say. And it's like,
It's not true.
It's like, yeah, you probably care a little bit. I mean, but yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's what I've always assumed, that it was this kind of defense mechanisms, because if you just look at like, human nature again, most people, I would say 99 times out of 100, they're going to be in some certain way, unless they have some weird mentality that I don't know anything about yet. But yeah, but no, I would agree with that 100%.
So that's practice 4. Practice 5 is to get help from someone who doesn't care about you. So this one's a little strange, because you'd think to overcome insecurity, you'd need someone who cares about you, who loves you, who believes in you, who's going to put air in your tires and wind in your sails.
Sure.
But those people actually get in the way because they confuse you about who the hero is in the story.
So almost be saying like a yes man, so to speak, like everything you do is great. And
sure. Or just someone who cares about you too much. So they're always bringing their energy. I want you to be happy. Come on, I believe in you. I encourage you. It's still external energy. And they're positioning themselves as the expert in your life, which is a form of judgment.
Okay.
So I love thinking about the hero's journey metaphor. So every hero at some point needs a guide.
Sure.
They need a wisdom character. There's a Gandalf, there's a Yoda, there's a Dumbledore, there's a Mr. Miyagi, but they're not the hero. And so at the crisis moment, the wisdom character's gone. Gandalf's gone. Dumbledore's dead.
Yeah.
Yoda's missing. It's not Mr. Miyagi fighting, the bully. It's Daniel's son. So no one's coming to save you. You created this mess. You're the only one who can fix it, but you will need someone who can show you the path and equip you with the tools and get you out of your own story. If Gandalf doesn't equip and prepare Frodo, well, he's never going to get there. So we all need help, especially with insecurity, because it's so ingrained we're so sure that our map is true, that our evidence is accurate. We've got all these stories that prove our assumptions are right. And so it's very hard to get objective about your own subjective story. But someone who doesn't care, they're not going to get in the way. They don't have a vested interest. So they can hold a clean space for you. So it might sound strange, but it's a very powerful thing when someone says, listen, you can't please me. You can't disappoint me. I don't need anything from you. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. I'm just here to serve you to get more of what you want, but you've got to want it, because me wanting it for you is useless to you, because as soon as I go away, then nothing's changed anyway. So it's to treat people as a responsible adult and to serve them for a season and then get out of the way. So I think that's the beautiful role of a coach or a mentor or, someone to come in for a season and get you out of your own head, show you the process, give you the certainty that you can do it, and then equip you and then disappear again. Exactly. Rather than
I agree.
These therapists that go on for 20 years.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Just because, I coach CrossFit on the side, and that I can only, tell people, my best practices, principles that have worked for me and everything. But just because, these things have worked for me doesn't mean they're going to work for you. But you got to kind of almost find your own way of what does work for you and get out of your own way and find out how to get to point A to point B. And and I'm not always going to be there, or the coach is not, the coach or the mentor or whatever will not always be there. So in order to, fix the problem or get to wherever your goal is, that, you got to eventually learn how to do it yourself. And that, you can kind of, like you said, the hero's journey, you can kind of show them the way and give them guidelines and help along the way. But eventually it's ultimately comes up to them. And it's a hard thing for people to learn.
Well, that's practice 6, be the hero, because eventually you got to do this. Eventually you have to go face the dragon. Eventually you have to go confront these assumptions and these opinions. And it's high stakes, right? Because you either die or you come out the other side reborn. That's the hero's journey. Whenever you're watching a hero's journey movie, you are on the edge of your seat because it looks like the hero's going to die. It looks like they're not going to find a way through. It looks like the obstacles are too big. They're doing something impossible. So that's how it'll feel to you too. You're like, I'm facing these fears that I've always thought was true, And if I find that they are true, I'll die. It's the end of the story. If I go back and review all the data and realize, yep, look at that. I am bad. I am inadequate. I don't belong. You can't recover from that. That is the end of the story. However, if you fully go and face the fear and fully examine these assumptions and opinions all the way back and realize they're not true, they've never been true, it was just the fiction of a child, then you get to go free. You come out the other side transformed. Mm-hmm. You've actually deconstructed this story all the way back to the beginning, and it's no longer there. It's no longer true. You've ended it. And then like that's a transformational moment. And from there, then you get access to practice 7, the final piece, which is to then rewrite the story. So you had the pen, you've always had the pen. Now use the pen as an adult. Now use the pen with intention, with purpose, with skill. Now write a narrative, write opinions about yourself that you like, opinions that will serve you, opinions that will equip you to go into the world and be and have and do all that you want. So people often want to rush to practice 7. They're like, oh yeah, I get it. I just got to rewrite the story. So let me write some affirmations on my mirror. Let me just be positive to myself and it's all solved. It's like, no, this is practice 7, not practice 1. You have to go on a journey and fully deconstruct the old story first. Otherwise, if you just try and put a Band-Aid over it and try and overwrite the new story, as soon as you get tired or stressed or anxious or triggered, that old story is going to come out and take over like it has done every other day in your life. You have to deconstruct it first. Then you're free to rewrite the new story.
Yeah, everybody wants a shortcut. And it doesn't work that way, whether it be overcome your insecurities, weight loss, getting to point A to point B in your life. Yeah, everybody, I mean, I want them to, but it's just exactly what you said. You might find a shortcut way, but eventually it's going to catch up with you in some form or the other. And you're going to just go right back to square one. And it sucks. Yeah. That's even worse. It's because you go so far and then you end up like, oh, I'm doing well. Then something takes you back, to step one. And then you almost creates more insecurity, like you said. And just
exactly right.
You go down even a darker road, and it's tough. Man. So just do the work. If I had to say anything, just if it's worth doing, it's going to be hard. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm assuming I already know the answer to this, but I want you to kind of elaborate though. I mean, with your work on this and these principles you developed and stuff, have you always? Did you say you've written 5 books?
That's right. Yeah.
Have you always just done research and just looking at this stuff and just kind of putting everything together? And is it almost just too much information at once? Or is you just always studying to just find out, is there's new trends coming up in it and new research? And so
sure. I'm a very pragmatic person, so I only care about what works.
That's good.
So I'm not academic. I don't like, I want something that's transformational. And I know I'm going to test its power on my own life first. And if I find that it works and I embody it, then I get to share it with others. So as a coach early on, I just went, I'd love to actually serve people and help them transform. I don't want to behavior manage them. I don't just want to give them short-term fixes. I'd love to be able to help people actually change their life and it stick. So I realized in order to do that, I got to not deal with behavior. I got to deal with beliefs. And because underneath all dysfunction are limiting beliefs, and the worst of those limiting beliefs are always the personal ones. Mm-hmm. So I just went, I got to get skillful around this. And so, I learned whatever I needed to learn and I practiced whatever I needed to practice. And I dealt with my own insecurity in every way that I could. And then obviously got better at it and sharper at it and quicker at it and more effective at it and have built on that. But I'm constantly learning and constantly growing and constantly experiencing more in the world and bigger experiences in the world of how to do this. But I think that model has been set for me for maybe 5 or 6 years now. And I think it's good. I think it's a complete model. I think it works really well and certainly has liberated me and countless others to do that as well.
Yeah. It's I like the path and I like your beliefs and your strategy behind it. It makes perfect sense. You get to step 1, you get to step 2 and step 3. And I like, when it comes to anything, as far as building something or making a principles, like you just said, I like steps. And it just makes sense with my brain that, all right, to get to this point, you got to master this to get to the next point and to the next point. And that, I don't know, for me, it just makes sense. I like levels for everything.
Right.
Yeah, and it just and it's I guess and it might be a cliche thought, obviously, but it seems like the workout and almost everything I've done as far as my life, as far as my workouts, competing, it's like you just can't. It's one of those things you can't. What is it? Run before you walk or whatever. You got to walk before you run. So you just you want to go in there and you see a bunch of these big dogs over there snatching and clean and jerking so much weight, and you want to eventually do that, but you can't do it. You got to stay one. And then it's really hard for somebody. And this is what I think would have almost developed insecurity for me, just because, my first competition, I wanted to be able to do that stuff, and like be the master and be the best of it all. And I was learning like, hey, there's no shortcuts to this, that you actually, you can't compare yourself to your day one to that person's day 580, whatever and that they've been putting in the work and they found their journey along the way. And I was like, I got to start this journey here. If you want to get better at something, if you want to change something about your lifestyle, you got to make these small changes. And you just said it earlier about the compound effect, and then you just kind of build off that and get to step one, get to step two, and then hopefully magic happens for you.
Exactly right. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah. I love stories like this. And I just, and it makes sense, like when you and I are talking about it, and I just have never looked at it and how many people or much people can struggle with it. And just that, they just don't know how to get out of their own way or find help or whatever. And it just, when I see it, I'm just like, well, just do it. It's just, just change it. It can't be that hard, but it is hard for them. And I just can never put myself put myself in their shoes and exactly see the things the way they're seeing them. And it's just, I don't know. It's tough for me. It's almost that it's because I try to relate, but I can to a certain extent, but then it's just like, well, just do it. Just do what things we've been talking about, but not everybody just has that. And it's wild to me. I just never got it, So, I mean, do you work with a lot of people like that who just initially just say, I won't help, but I can't do it. I can't do it.
Well, everyone, I mean, they come to me because they're stuck. If they could do it themselves, they wouldn't be talking to me. And they've kind of realized I've tried it all the ways I can. I don't know how to do this. And so, yeah, I've always been a curious person. So I love deconstructing things. I kind of have an engineering brain. I want to break it down to its smallest parts and understand the model and then build it back again. And so I've just thought about insecurity like that. I reckon this is a strategy. I reckon this is not a weird, mysterious, messy problem. I think it's a predictable problem. And so that curiosity around how does it work? Man, if I could understand how it worked, then I could deconstruct it and reconstruct it and help other people to see how it works for them and bring change. So that's what I've done.
Do you feel like a lot more people have come to you, especially during, COVID times? I mean, I know Australia got hit pretty rough, with the rule changes and things like that. I don't know 100% of everything was going on, but I know like quarantine or lockdown was pretty rough. Yeah, I mean, did you have a lot of people come to you in these times, like when they actually could kind of
exactly reflect? I think the interesting thing about the COVID season was it was such a loss of certainty for people. Everything they were certain about the start of 2020, now they were uncertain about their jobs, their futures, their finances, their holidays. It was like all the external certainty in their life had gone. And people realized that once the external certainty was gone, they didn't have any internal certainty. They were in chaos. All this stuff had been holding them up. And when it was gone, there were some massive problems internally. So, there were a lot of people that were faced with insecurity that they didn't even know existed before in that period. So, which I think is a gift, because it's like if you had cancer and you had no idea about it, you'd want to know that you had cancer. The sooner you can deal with it, the better your chances of survival are. So if you can't see that there's an insecurity problem, well, then you can't get to do the work of changing it. So whatever has to happen for that to come to the surface, that to me is a gift.
Yeah. And, just touching on that or echoing with that, I've kind of said the same thing, that life, I feel like we're living off momentum so fast and at a, record pace, I guess. And all of a sudden when it came to a stop, when we had to actually sit down and said, hey, you can't go stick to your normal routines throughout the day, that it was actually like a lot more awareness came about people's selves, and just wonder like, ooh, what happened in the last 10 years? Was I really happy or really doing what I thought I was? And that's kind of what happened to me. I mean, I'm not saying I had anything bad or insecurities or anything, but it was just like me kind of self-reflecting. Is this where I wanted my life to be going? I mean, I didn't really ask questions. I was just going with the flow of things, and just, all of a sudden, for example, with my work, I just celebrated, I think, my 10th year. And I was like, ooh, I've been here 10 years. Was this what I had planned? you know, I mean, when I first took that job, I was like, I'll be here a couple of years and I'll move on to something else. But then, you know, ooh, damn, we're here 10 years now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's just, but it seems like more of this is starting to become, more talked about, more aware that, hey, it's okay to talk about these things. And it's okay to be, if you have insecurities, it's okay to talk about them. And if you need help, find out somebody like yourself to get the best help you can. And just that never really occurred to me that so much was, or people seemed like, no, everything was always okay on the surface.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that's a good point. It pulled people up, it brought things to the surface, it created awareness. And that to me is a good thing, because it then, even though it's painful, it presents an opportunity for change that didn't exist before.
Yeah. And just, you know, I mean, you know, I don't wish bad things on anybody or anything, but I mean, to have something like this happen, of course, COVID, I mean, this is one of the pros that came out of it, I guess, that people could start to, you know, think about their lives and think about if it's, you know, how do I get help if I want to stop being, you know, insecure about problem X, Y, and Z or whatever, you know, and, you know, a lot of it, I mean, it's even helped me to talk about, you know, imposter syndrome a lot, and just that, you know, and like how to get over it, and just have these cool conversations with people like yourself. And that, you know, before that, or before technology, I would have never been doing that, you know, and just actually learning how to, you know, I've always thought of myself as a person who was not able to express their feelings or emotions very well, or just because it was always kind of like, oh, Wayne, you'll get over it. Just don't worry about it. Just go, you know, go watch TV or go do something. And just, you know, there's like, oh, well, let me just shove it back down here, whatever I'm feeling, and, or whatever. So it was kind of like, it's okay to have these conversations. And, you know, and that's one thing that, you know, in starting these podcasts and having these conversations, I want people to kind of reflect on that. Just because if you're the, you know, the alpha male, or you're the tough guy or whatever, it's okay to have, you know, conversations like this and get, you know, things out and talk about, you know, what your feelings and your insecurities, and, or seek help. And yeah, cause most people don't really understand the exact, you know, we touched on earlier, what exactly how it's impacting your health, and not only mentally and physically.
That's exactly right. No, it's so true.
So, but again, I know we're getting kind of close on time here, and I appreciate you sitting down and having this chat with me. And if people want to seek out to you and find your books and all that, if you want to plug all that, how do they do that?
I mean, if you just search the Insecurity Project, you'll find me from wherever you are in the world. Or if you can work out how to spell my name, Jaemin Frazer. There's only one of me in the world, as far as I can tell.
Nice.
You'll find my podcast, my books, short courses, coaching opportunities. So that's the best way to get in touch. I'm active on the socials, Insta, LinkedIn, Facebook. My website's jaeminfrazer.com. So yeah, fairly easy to find.
Cool. Jaemin, thanks for doing this, man. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris. Lovely conversation.
Okay. Anything else we want to touch on, or anything you want to say before we call it a night?
I'm good. That's been great.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning to everyone over there in Australia, and good night to everyone here.